Hello guys, recently we were talking about solving tactics ideas. I just showed you the list with 10 points and I just mentioned that we are going to step by step analyze them and I just show you how it works together. And now in this episode I'm going to show you the ideas about the attacks, all the tactical themes. I'll explain them step by step very briefly, and in the meantime I will be trying to show you another points after the next video, and then you will see how it merges together. And I hope you will like it, as it is going to be pretty much coherent part. At the same time, I'm just showing you how these tactical motifs are working in the very simple examples and what are their names. Take notice that these important tactical themes is the selection I did because there are many more of them, but I guess these are the most important if you are learning the basics and the middle level ideas. Therefore, I hope you will like it, and let's get started. And now, as we can see, this is the first tactical theme. At this moment, it's the advanced pawn. Let's look from the black's perspective. Black has the pawns on the 4th rank for the perspective of white. The most advanced are the ones that I'm highlighting right now. At the same time, take notice that we have the advantage of the pawns on the right side of the board. Therefore, the pawn on the A file doesn't have its counterpart. Therefore, we'll try to break through, exploiting the idea that the pawn is protecting the bishop at the same time. And now how it works. If the pawn captures the pawn, we captures the bishop and we are gaining the advantage. And now, what would happen if white plays different way? For example, if white tries to stop the pawn with the rook and then bring another pieces to the action. Now, we are pushing the pawn forward, and now the idea being, if the pawn gets to the back rank and it is not being captured by the rook, it's a new queen. At the same time, the king cannot get pretty quickly to the square of the pawn, and if the rook blocks physically the pawn, we are having this idea to execute. Rook check, attacking the king and the rook at the same time. After the trade, the king gets closer, and now we are moving forward with the pawn. Even if they capture the knight, we are having a new queen. Of course, there is the other variation. If they tried the f3 pawn moving forward, now we're going rook d2. After bishop step back, we are moving forward, and the same idea as previously. This time, the rook is not on a1. After the trade, the pawn is just one square away from promotion, and therefore, at this moment, we are just even protecting the knight. Therefore, at this moment, we just use the idea of the advanced pawn with the idea of the breakthrough, and at the same time, with the idea of the motive of the deflection of the pawn from protecting the bishop. Therefore, take notice, even though I am just explaining the ideas individually, most often the time we'll be working together with the other ideas. And now, let's get into the next tactical theme, this time attraction. Now, we are having this position, the king is pretty much very in the open space, therefore we are working pretty quickly with the checkmating idea due to the heavy pieces in action. After rook check, take notice the queen cannot capture the rook due to the pin. The king cannot get anywhere except capturing the rook because all of the squares are attacked. After the capture, we are checkmating the king. And now, this was the tactical theme attraction. We attracted the king onto the square that will be mating the king next move. Now, one of the most common idea of the back rank weakness. Back rank weakness or back rank mate, you can just call it both ways. And now, very simple. Back rank idea is the following. If the king cannot step back to the second rank, and we have the major pieces that can come to the back rank, they will be delivering checkmate. And now, how it is done. At this moment, we cannot get into the checkmate in one due to the rook protecting this square. Therefore, first we'll be destroying the defender, and after that we'll be checkmating the king with the back rank weakness. This is how it is done. After queen check, the only legal move is to capture. There is no defender at the back rank, and we are checkmating next move. Another tactical theme is blocking. we are blocking the king's escape as the king tries to step back into this safe place, and after that we are checkmating the king. Take notice, if we started it with the queen check, the king will be escaping, but if we just block the escape square playing f3 check, take notice the rook is protecting the pawn, therefore the king cannot capture. The only moves are either the pawn captures or the king step back. If the pawn captures, we deliver checkmate in 1. Of course, if the king would go into the back rank, we are checkmating the same way, therefore it's checkmate, using the blocking Vim. Another one of the most popular and one of the most common, is the capturing the defender. Capturing the defender means that there is some defenders that fulfill that function, and we want to get rid of this function for these defenders. At this moment, as you probably can spot, if the knight get into the b5 square, it would be to a checkmate, except the pawn is attacking the square. After we capture the pawn and its function, take notice the knight will be no longer possible to be captured on b5. At this moment, the king cannot capture the rook because it's protected by the knight. All of the other squares are either occupied, either protected by any other pieces. Therefore, the only legal move is to capture, and now the rook cannot capture diagonally. The knight is attacking the king, and this is game over. Black checkmating the king using the capturing the defender idea. Now, the sixth of these tactical Vims are the clearance. Take notice that if the bishop would be gone, after we put the knight onto the queen's square, it's going to be the checkmate. But take notice, at this moment, we cannot get to the rook to the back rank, as there are 2 pieces along the way, but we can use the idea to remove these pieces, to clear the g file, and to allow the knight to get into the h7 square by sacrificing the queen. How it is done? Queen check on the back rank. Take notice, the bishop cutting off the squares on the diagonal. The only legal move is to capture. Now the knight step back to h7, game over, checkmate. The rook is covering all of the squares on the g file. The bishop is covering the square on the diagonal. Knight is attacking the king. Knight cannot be captured, and the king can escape. Therefore, it's the checkmate using the clearance idea. Now the idea of the coercion. Coercion is a little bit weird name, but take notice, I'll explain it in a very simple manner. Coercion is something like forcing the piece into the square that it could be attacked by any other pieces. Therefore, at this moment, I guess it will be pretty simple. Now, at this moment, the king and the rook are standing on the diagonal. If we had the light square bishop, we would put the light square bishop into one of these squares and we'll be winning the material by pinning the rook. At the same time, we cannot make the fork as yet with the knight, because the pieces are not standing in the proximity to make this fork possible. But what happens after rook check? Of course, after rook blocks, we just capture rook for free, but if the king gets into only legal move for g2, now we have the pieces that are standing in the knight's distance. If the knight was on one of these squares highlighting green, either the square h4 or the square e1, it's going to be the skewer. Now we have just the opportunity to make the skewer in one move, and after that we are winning the material using the idea of forcing the piece into the square that we can attack it and win the material, so-called coercion. And now the next tactical Vim, deflection. What is the deflection, you may ask? Let's check it out. At this moment, the queen is taking out all of the squares for the king. If the queen could get to the back rank, it's going to be a checkmate, except the white queen is protecting this square. What happens if the queen would not protect this square? Then the checkmate is obvious. Therefore, let's deflect the queen from the function of protecting the f1 square. Now, after the bishop gets into the diagonal throwing the check, there are only 2 legal moves. Either the queen captures the bishop, either the rook blocks the check. After queen captures the bishop, take notice the queen is no longer protecting the back rank square, therefore we are just making checkmate in one move very easily. And of course, if the rook blocks the check, we just capture the rook, the same effect, checkmate, as the king cannot escape into any other safe squares. Let's get into the discovered attack. Discovered attack means that there are two pieces that are being attacked. At the same time, one piece discovered the attack to the other one. Take notice at this example, due to the discovered attack with check, it doesn't matter if it is check or not. It may be, but it doesn't have to be. Therefore, at this moment, do not think about check, as this is necessary one. Now, after the pawn move forward, making the idea of attacking the king, the rook is not being protected, but is being attacked by the bishop. After the king captures, the rook is gone. Take notice, after the check, the rook couldn't get into any other squares, as the check was from the pawn. And now, at this moment, the bishop takes the rook, and we are winning the material. And now we may ask, what about discovered check? Because we had the discovered attack, and now let's get into discovered check. Discovered check is pretty easily to think how it is done, as there must be the piece that is standing on one of the lines, either horizontal, vertical, or diagonal, from the king's distance. And now, at this moment, if the knight is gone, we have the check, and now where the knight can go into the square to attack the most valuable piece. It's either onto c6 attacking the queen, either to f7 attacking the queen, or f7 attacking the king, the queen and the rook at the same time. But if we play knight f7, the king would capture, game over. Now we can have two reasonable ideas, either getting to g6 and then grabbing the rook, either getting to c6 and then grabbing the queen. Of course, c6 is better because rook is less valuable than the queen, therefore we try to win as much material as possible, unless there are a lot of complications. After the bishop blocks, we capture the rook and the queen, and we are just winning the material. Of course, if the queen blocks the check, it is the same, because the knight would capture on e7 square, and after the capture, again, we are up material. We had the discovered check explained. Now, the most powerful move of all of the moves except checkmate in one. Double check. Why double check is that powerful, you may ask? Because after the double check, the only legal move, the only legal defense, I must say, is to escape with the king, run away with the king, or flee with the king. Now, we can see the rook and the knight are standing on the same line. After knight stepping back, attacking the king, there is a double check. The double check means that two pieces simultaneously attacking the king. Sometimes it's the piece and the pawn. It is possible as well. After the only legal move, the king gets to the corner, we have the checkmate, as the knight is protecting the rook. Now let's get into the double attack. Many times the double attack was named, let's say, in the 1980s, 1990s, or 2000s, and since, let's say, last 5-6 years, the double attack mostly is called fork. And now, I will be using interchangeably fork or double attacks, but mostly I'll try to use the fork. Fork means that we are attacking at least two pieces at the same time, and it is beautiful if we could attack the pieces that are not protected at all. At this moment, as we can see, LPDO, loose pieces drop off. There are two pieces that are hanging. Hanging means they are not protected by anything. And now after the rook gets into the line, we're attacking both bishops at the same time. And there are three variations. The first one of the bishops step back into the safe spot, the other bishop is being captured. The second one, the bishop gets into the safe spot, but the other one is being captured. And the third one, a little bit more complicated, if you can say. The bishop is taking the pawn before the other bishop is being captured, but now we are capturing this bishop because it's going to be easier to transform the advantage, to convert the advantage. But anyway, in all of these cases, the advantage is enough to win, as we use the fork to win one of the bishops. Interference. Interference means that we are having the great coordination of the pieces, but we are making the moves that makes the pieces coordination broken. We are breaking pieces coordination. Now, at this moment, technically, we could capture the queen, but it's, the rook, but it's protected twice. But at the same time, if we just throw the check and capture the rook will be capturing our queen. But now, due to the position of the king, we are exploiting this fact that after the check from c7, we are making the contact with the piece that we are going to capture. And now at this time, the king must get into one of the squares that rook was protecting the other rook. Therefore, the king breaks the communication, or you can say coordination with the pieces. After that, we capture the rook, and now we are having the winning advantage. Now this is the mate. All the 30 other names that I'll be at some point explaining them step by step, all of the checkmates in one episode. But this time I'll just show you one checkmate that is one of the most popular, except back rank checkmate. The most popular and the most beautiful. It is so-called Smafford checkmate. At this moment, the knight and the queen are attacking the square next to the king. If we sacrifice the queen, take notice the king cannot capture because of the protection from the knight. Rook must capture the only legal move, and now we are Smafford mate on the board. We are suffocating the king. Therefore, it's the Smafford mate. Take notice all of the 30 names of the checkmates doesn't need to be learned by heart, but if you know them, it will be easier to know what kind of checkmates you missed or what kind of checkmates you are going to practice. The next idea, the next tactical theme is the overloading. Overloading means that one of the pieces has too many functions to fulfill. At this moment, as you can see, the rook is attacking the rook is protecting the rook. At the same time, we are having the pawn that is the passed pawn, at the same time very close to the promotion. And you may ask, what happens if you push the pawn? You may say, wait a second, our rook is not being protected. Is it true? Yes. But if the rook captures the pawn, the pawn is getting to the promotion, game over. We just won the advantage. We have just won the rook for the queen. And now, at this moment, what happens if the pawn moves forward and the rook captures the pawn, not allowed to get to the promotion? When the rook doesn't protect the rook, and now the rook is being captured, game over. And the third variation after this one is the following. If the rook gets to c1 to protect the promoting square and protect the rook simultaneously, after the rook is overloaded again, and now after the rook captures, we are promoting. Of course, after the promotion and winning, if the rook didn't capture, for example, if the rook stepped back, we just won the rook for free. It's the advantage after all as well. Now the idea of the pin. Take notice, the pin is one of the most common and one of the most important of all of the tactical ideas, tactical themes. Therefore, I'll be recording one of the videos devoted to pin, probably for 15 to 20 minutes, because pin is one of the least practiced and least understood and easily to overlook of all of the tactical ideas. At this moment, I'll briefly mention that if the bishop is attacking the pawn and the king is behind it, the pawn cannot capture on the other line of the pin because it's illegal. Therefore, we are exploiting this, threatening to capture the king. The pawn cannot capture the queen, therefore it's game over, checkmate with the using the pin. Now, the 17th of the tactical ideas is the promotion. Take notice, promotion can be done in two ways. Either we are promoting the pawn up to the one of the four pieces, queen, rook, bishop, knight, or we can do the same, but with the capture. At this moment, if we push the pawn and capture the rook with the queen, it would be pretty bad, because queen got to the back rank, and after that it is the checkmate. How it is done? Very simple. The king cannot step back because of the pawn, game over, black won. But if we just look at the position of the king and the queen, we can just spot that if the knight would be in one of the squares highlighted blue, either c6 or c8, it's going to be the check from the knight. Therefore, we are making so-called under promotion, capturing the piece on the back rank, promoting to the knight due to the check, and after the king step back, we are having the one endgame. Another one is the skewer of the tactical motives. Skewer is whenever the pieces are standing on one of the file, either the horizontal, vertical, or diagonal. At this moment, LPDO, loose piece drop off. Now, as you can see, if we just put the queen onto the same line, attacking the king first, and then less valuable piece, it's the description of the skewer. After stepping back, we are winning the queen and the game. One of the two last of the stuff that I would like to briefly mention is the trapped piece. Trapped piece is one of the most common, especially with the pawns, that we are trapping the piece, but it could be with any other pieces except including the king. After rook getting into the 4th rank, take notice the queen doesn't have the safe spot. If the queen captures the rook, we just recapture, but where the queen could go? Technically, it could get into any of the squares on the 3rd rank, but we could capture the queen anyway with the rook. If the queen gets to the h5, with the queen. If the queen gets to the g5 with the bishop, to f6 with the pawn, to h6 with the bishop, to g3 and to h2 with the pawns, and into the h2 with the bishop, with the queen, or with the king. Therefore, no matter when the queen goes or captures, we just recapture the queen, winning the material. This is the trapping the queen with the rook. And the last tactical theme I would like to show you briefly is the idea related to the X-ray attack. X-ray attack means that we are attacking the piece through another piece. It's something like the X-ray that we are having in the hospital. And now, at this moment, as we can see, the rook is attacking the bishop directly, and the queen is attacking through the queen. It's something like the X-ray attack by the queen and the direct attack by the bishop. And now, if you just capture the bishop with the rook, take notice the rook is being protected by the queen with the X-ray attack. After the queen would capture the rook, will be recapture, winning the material. And of course, after the queen would capture the queen on the d5, we recapture with the pawn, and we are up material as previously and the previous examples as well. And now I hope you will like this set of examples that I briefly explained. Take notice that all of this tactical motives selection was done by me, because practically speaking, there are a lot of places that you can have a look of these such lists. There are more or less of this, and I just selected 20 of this, not to make you confused, and the most important from my practice up to the level 2000. I guess you should learn this, and step by step I'll be recording the videos onto each of these specific tactical ideas, tactical themes, and explaining them a way deeper. Therefore, take notice, it's just the introduction into the tactical themes, and now you know what to look for when there are puzzles up to the level 2000 at Lichess. Okay guys, I hope it's enough for this video. Let me know if you like it, let me know if you have any questions or any topics you'd like me to address, and see you next video. Take care.